She sent me the right link, I don't know.
Hi,
How you doing?
good.
What's up?
In the hospital here. The suit is all.
All right. All right, thank you everyone for coming today. I'm Janelle Taylor, and I'm going to start us out with talking a little bit about the Excellence in Education grant and some of the other research grants and funding availabilities that we have through Northern. Mostly we do this presentation because sometimes it's a little bit easier to talk through the rules and the regulations that are out there. It's the same reason we do the thesis one. That technically all of this is available in print and it's all on our website, and you're free to obviously look through it anytime you want. But sometimes it's easier to have somebody kind of explain it a little bit and be able to ask questions where you get stuck. So I'm going to talk a little bit about this one. Also, the excellence in education is something that you kind of need to prep for. You need to have a plan as you go into the winter semester. This year's deadline is February 8th, which sounds like it's a long ways away, but when you think in semester times, like we're getting there. So just so you know, be aware, February 8th at 8 a.m., that's a Monday. So that gives you kind of the weekend to finish things up. That's what a number of our deadlines we've moved to, and we can do that. Also, if anyone has questions, we're recording this, but if you have anything that you want to ask that you think might be helpful for everyone, feel free to unmute yourself and just ask it. It's easier for me than watching like the chat the whole time. But also we'll have a chance at the end. I'll pause the recording if you want to ask something that you think is, more specific about your research or something that you might not want to share with everyone, whoever watches this recording. So the Excellence in Education program is internally funded by NMU. It is an award of $1,500 for students that is for research in the summer. The concept is to help you kind of bridge that summertime, maybe get some things done about your research during that time, and kind of prop up your research as you go into the next semester or as you finish out your degree. Note that it does have a 1 credit tuition stipend, and you do have to be enrolled in a course over the summer. So be aware that kind of like all those things kind of come with it. It's not just working on your research, it has to be kind of rolled into that as well. So the basic eligibility rules, it's not really that difficult, but still it kind of comes up sometimes. You must be a graduate student. You have to be in good academic standing. So that means you can't be on probation for any reason. And you also cannot be using the NMU dependent child tuition waiver. So that's just people whose parents may work on campus. They already get a discount on their tuition. So we don't do extra awards for those students because other students need them a little bit more. So one of the main questions that comes up for excellence in education is what is fundable versus non-fundable? And some of what Kristen talks about at the end of this workshop is going to touch on some of that for grants in general. Obviously, things like internal awards like excellence in education are very student focused. So they usually have kind of even more rules about what you can do and not do. So be aware that any grant that you look at though will have some kind of rules like this about what you can buy, what you can do with it and what you can't do with it. For the excellence in education, we're looking for things that your department defines as scholarly work, things that result in a tangible product. That's important. That's part of the reason why attending a conference where you're not presenting is not allowed, because you're simply going there. You're not really producing anything. You're not using it to come up with something at the end of the time. You can use the funds to get supplies, materials, and living expenses. Living expenses always comes up. This is a rare award where you can actually fund yourself to kind of live through the summer and focus on your research a little bit more, but you do have to define what you're going to do at the end of that. You can't use it for summer living expenses and say, well, I had a great summer and I learned things. That's it. So just be aware, you do have to tie the things together. It's not that open-ended. Also, expenses occurred to If you want to go to a conference or another type of meeting, and you're actually presenting your work, then that is allowed. It's the ones where you're not presenting your work that is not okay. Obviously, due to COVID, there could be some things about that. I talk about that a little bit, a few slides later, but just be aware that, you know, you may need to kind of pivot your plans based on COVID. Nobody knows what next summer brings right now. Also note that you cannot fund things that you do as part of your normal job. If you are a graduate assistant, be sure that your research is separate from what you do as a graduate assistant, and you can't fund things that, you know, like prepping for the next year's teaching material, something like that. So this I'm not gonna make us read through, but it is a good, it's a good thing to go back to that you can use as kind of a clear way to put together your application. So we have a cover page, we have a narrative that's 4 to 6 pages. Be aware, like, to keep an eye on the specifics. It's double spaced, it's 12-point font. Please don't use Comic Sans, things like that. There is a budget form. This is available on the Grants and Contracts website. Actually, I can make that clickable when I upload this later. Normally we do this in person, so I don't have a lot of links because that's pointless. But we do have all these things available on the website that you can kind of download the forms and use them. So you don't need to make any, please actually don't make anything up on your own. Use the ones that are provided, because the committee is going to be looking at a lot of these and they want them all to all look the same so they can kind of judge you based on your peers and not be horribly confused by what you've written. That is largely, I think, this is the main part of this grant, and I think all grants is be clear, be concise, make your point as clearly as possible, because you have to think there's a lot of different people reading these that aren't always in your field. So try to get it to a broad audience. So the process, these are just kind of some tips. On the side over here, I noted a little bit of behind the scenes. The Excellence in Education takes a minute to run through the whole process and for you to get notified. So we usually start getting kind of panicked students somewhere in there that think that they have not gotten it and just haven't heard. We will tell you whether you received it or whether you didn't. We always will let you know. But just know that once the application comes into us, it goes to your department head. They will do a ranking. Then it goes to the graduate programs committee and they do the actual funding decisions. And then those have to go through and be announced properly. So the process does take a little while. It's not just you. It's not that you're not hearing anything specifically. It's just kind of how these go. And that's fairly normal when Kristen talks about grants too. They're usually a multi-step process. It's not just one person like saying yes or no and you hear in 24 hours. So also note to plan ahead for your side of things. When you're prepping the leading up to the deadline, plan ahead to get your signatures. So the cover sheet on this grant requires signatures from your faculty advisor and your department head. Know that those people aren't always available. They're not sitting there waiting.
My name's Julia Talon. I got a missed call from you guys. I had a biopsy last week and I was wondering if you guys, oh, I'm sorry.
Hi, yeah. Thanks for joining. We're in Excellence in Education and Grants workshop. So if you want to stay and watch the workshop, you can totally do that. Okay, I'm gonna go on from there then. That was the first. So when you're setting up to do your things, make sure that you're prepping to get your signatures ahead of time. We usually say, like, if you can do a week ahead of time, that's amazing. Just be aware that people aren't always available and sitting there waiting to sign your things. You are asking some fairly busy people for signatures, and they're going to need a second to review your submission as well. They usually do not sign without at least checking it over to make sure that's okay before they're putting their signature on it. Note that you do need to submit a PDF to your department head, to the Office of Graduate Education by the deadline. This must be scanned on an electronic form with the signed cover sheet scanned as well, and a complete budget form. Make sure you're checking over your things and that nothing gets deleted when you save it. That can happen with PDFs from time to time. We'll generally let you know, and usually we can be a little bit flexible if we find it on the deadline and everything is blank and obviously you had meant to do, other things are filled out. But definitely take a look at it when you send it to make sure things are sending correctly. So due to COVID and generally just due to all things being much more electronic, I think this is an option we're going to keep after the COVID time ends. We can help you get your signatures on your cover letter electronically, so you're not sending a piece of paper around to a bunch of people. It can get lost. It gets lost in the mail. It doesn't make it to us on time. It's just a pain. So we can help you get the signatures. It's really not a big deal, but it does require you to plan ahead. So I've set a time here as Thursday at 5 p.m. That's so it's due on the Monday, the 8th. So that's kind of the week before. That gives us time we'll have to manually upload that into a system and put in the information from your signers. So if you want to take advantage of that electronically signing option, make sure that you send us an email by that deadline to graduate@nmu.edu. Make sure that you include your email, a little bit about at least some information about what you're asking for. Sometimes that's kind of hard to catch on to. And the names, email addresses, and titles of people who need to sign your cover sheet. That just makes us, helps us to kind of process things, get it through, and then we'll send it through an electronic e-signature system and CC all the parties on there so you all receive it at the end. But that way you don't have to walk things around campus. And like I said, that's something that I think we're keeping potentially later. And this is also a process that we're using for thesis signatures right now. So if you are somebody who's working on a thesis in the next semester or two, it's in the thesis one as well, but it's something to keep an eye on. So this is a little bit of information about what the committee is looking at when they get your Excellence in Education application. So they're looking at the significance of the project and the soundness of methodology. They don't want to fund something that kind of won't come up with good data, won't come up with good research. They will look at the clarity of the presentation and the planning. So clarity is really that it makes sense, that multiple members of the committee from different departments understand what you're trying to say. And also they're going to look at it and see if you have planned out your project in a way that is logical and can be done in time and is going to actually get you the data that you want. These are generally, they're all usually pretty senior faculty members, so they're all involved in different types of research. It's not the first research project they'll have ever seen in their lives, so they're able to kind of look at that and suss that out. They will look at your qualifications. That's not exactly, that sounds quite as scary as it sounds. They just want to make sure that you have some background in the topic that you're talking about. You don't have to have extensive research background. Your students, that's not really something they can expect at that point, but they do want to see that you have some knowledge. You're not just picking a random topic that's way outside of what you're in school for. Obviously, adherence to format and content requirements. Things can be easily thrown out if we have more applications than we can fund. That's a really easy one to just say, well, they didn't bother to read it clearly. They didn't submit all the things we needed. We can't accept this. Somebody else gets the money. And justification of additional funding. So the Excellence in Education Award, you are able to get for 2 years. So whether your program is 2 or 3 years, you're able to get it funding twice. So if you're working on the same or a similar project the second time, make sure you're adding that you did get the funding last year and this is how you're doing it differently. This is how it expands your project beyond where it already was. Make sure you're saying that and they're not thinking that you're just trying to get more money for doing the same thing or something that's already potentially been done. So pay attention to detail. That's obvious with all grants, but we do actually offer this kind of rubric. It's out online on the grants website. Check the grants website all the time for things like this. This tells you exactly how they're going to score your application. So whenever things like this are available, definitely have that by your side as you go through your final or as you write it out, because that pretty much tells you exactly what they want to see. So these are some things that I've seen on the collection side, and from usually I don't usually sit on graduate program committee meetings, but I do when it comes to excellence in education. So I kind of absorb a little bit of what they're talking about, what they're looking for people they do fund and don't fund. One of the main things is make sure it's a project that you're able to do. If you're going for a project that's absolutely huge, you can write about your whole project and then specify very clearly how this amount of money in this amount of time will do some portion of that project. So make sure that they're able to see how you're going to use this little bit. And if you're doing a massive, massive research thing, be aware that they're going to know that you can't finish that in this amount of time, and be kind of realistic with yourself. The summer sounds like a long period of time, but really once it gets going, that goes by really quickly. So be realistic about what you're planning to do. Also this year, as I mentioned before, keep the pandemic in mind. We don't know what next summer brings. And I know last year, obviously the deadline was in February and everyone had to pivot to social distancing and virtual options. And it was really hard. This year, at least we know that going in. So if you're planning something that may be in person, plan a second option, maybe even include that in your application so that they can see that you're planning other ways to get this done if it doesn't work out in your first option, which I mean, may be a lot more fun to do things in person, but just may not be realistic this year. Note that we do allow modifications. We did a lot last year with COVID, but normally we don't allow a whole lot of them, and they do have to go through the graduate programs committee for approval, and they do not meet during the summer. So if you need to make modification, let your advisor know, they'll let us know, we can work on things with you, but it's not really a guarantee. And if you meet if it's too late into the year, you have the possibility of just not being able to do things. So make sure that you're planning your project in such a way that you're not making huge changes, because it's just not really a great way to go. Obviously, nobody usually wants to do those things, but make sure you're thinking ahead a little bit. Do remember this involves a summer credit, that you'll be taking a credit during the summer, and make sure that you're talking to your advisor or some other faculty member about teaching that credit, or doing a directed study, a thesis capstone, what that credit will look like, because you'll need to fill out that paperwork at the end of the school year to get you into the credit, and the Excellence in Education money will not pay out until you're enrolled in that credit. So note that the deadline is February 8th, 8 a.m. Your application must be in electronically to all the places where it is required, which is your department head and the graduate at nmu.edu email. Note that your application should include all the main components and should be in one document, because that's how we're going to send it to the committee, and that's your responsibility to make sure that things are organized correctly for the committee, which I believe we kind of say on here too. So how do you do documents in one file? NMU has Adobe Acrobat licenses. If you don't have it, you can go to the help desk. I think you can also call and have it virtually installed on your computer as well. And that allows you to take multiple PDFs and combine them and switch them around in one document. The library also has resources for this. Kevin McDonough is the librarian who oversees those things, and he will definitely help you if you contact him. Also, if you are really stuck with it, you can also email the graduate office at thatgraduate@nmu.edu and ask us for help. We're willing to do it. We have the ability to take PDFs and put them in order, but you do need to make sure it's planned out ahead of time, that you give us a time to do it. You're not emailing half an hour before the deadline. And realistically, because the deadline is a Monday this year, you have to back it up a little bit because our staffing is Monday through Friday. Also note that we will not reformat it. We won't do fixes, and you need to tell us in what order your documents need to be and have them labeled properly. So we have before gotten, 6 partial Word documents, and they're all labeled like XY234. No one knows what that is, and it's really hard to put them in order, and it's kind of created some stresses because sometimes things have gotten to the committee in the wrong order. And then we feel bad. We're hoping that the student isn't getting dinged for that, but at the same time, it's aggravating when you get stuff that doesn't logically make sense when that is really part of the application process that you should be doing when you submit. This is just a quick note that I'm sure Kristen's going to hit later. Winning is only the first step of a grant. note that you are going to be enrolled in a credit. You're going to be doing things over the summer. You need to note how you used your money. You need to have some plan about how you finished your project, and you will need to submit a final report. They're generally due October 15th of every year, telling us how you spent your excellence in education money, what you got out of the project. And then that's reviewed by the grants office and can definitely be used in future funding. If we don't get something like that, you're on kind of a short list of people who we may not be funding next time. So we do have, really there's a link here. We have a final report that you can use. It doesn't have to be a page for each of these questions. A paragraph is just fine. So doing a final report, especially for internal NMU awards, is just not that difficult, but know that these are the questions they're going to ask you. And this is the sort of thing that you should have data about at the end of your project. So I just wanted to take the time to let you know about some other funding opportunities that are out there. The first one that's due right now are the Spooner Awards. Those are $500 awards. They would go directly to your department for supplies and other things like in your lab. Those are due November 16th this year. So, I mean, that's coming up pretty quickly. So probably you've already been talking to advisors about it if you're going for one of those. But if not, you can still, they're not too difficult to apply for. So you can always go ahead and do that in the next week or so. Also note that we do the 3-minute thesis competition. It's back this year. We did it last year, but it kind of got shortened by the pandemic. So we are doing, it's a 3-minute research presentation contest that we're doing virtually this year. It should be in early to mid-February. Haven't quite set the date yet because we're still figuring out exactly like the formats for stuff like this now. But the winners of the 3-minute thesis, they will get voted by a judging panel, and they do actually get prize money. And the graduate one also gets exposure by being invited to a this year, a virtual regional competition with, I think, over 100 different schools represented. So that's pretty cool if you're looking at PhD programs or looking to work at another university. That can get your name and your research out there a little bit. More information on that later, definitely, but just a heads up that it's out there. So I'm going to pause this for a second in case anybody has some questions, and then I can pass it off to our next presenters. As long as I can pause properly.
Hello, I am Jess Jones. I work for the NMU Foundation specifically, Director of Donor Engagement, Jill of all trades, however. So everything from working very specifically with our donor funded scholarships and our financial aid partners and making sure that those get awarded, and the money that people are giving to make sure it goes out and helps students actually does that. It's an important job, and I really am lucky to be able to sit between people who want to help our students do great things and the students that are doing great things. It's obviously been a strange year, goes without saying. And the good news for us is the only scholarships that we were not able to award last year were scholarships that were in regards to study abroad. We had study abroad trips that were canceled, awards that were ready to go out, and some that went out partially with people that were places and had to come back. But the rest of it was canceled for this year as well. So we are sitting on additional funds, and we will disperse those when we can have sanctioned university travel for our students, and specifically with study abroad. So otherwise, all of our scholarships are available to primarily, the good news for the purposes of this conversation are for current undergraduates and graduate students. And so what that means, and why I make sure to say that, and I kind of am always specific about it, and again, it doesn't really apply so much to this audience, is we have very few scholarships for incoming freshmen. NMU actually does a really great job of working with incoming freshmen and transfer students and ensuring that they get automatic awards. They have a whole separate, actually that's what I was referring to last night, they have a whole separate awarding system that incoming freshmen and incoming students will be cycled through. So they're pretty well taken care of. So where we come in is once you've been at NMU, either as an undergrad or a graduate student, and you're established and you are coming up on your winter semester and kind of thinking about your plans for the next year, whether it does include research or conference, or just the fact that you are limited to 20 hours a week at an undergrad for an on-campus job, or you feel like you want to concentrate more on your studies and having some extra funds so you don't have to be working would be nice. I'm going to show you how you as a student, undergraduate or graduate, go about applying for these funds. Last year we had about 600 awards go out the door, almost $1 million out to our NMU students. So now I'm going to share my screen. Always have to make sure I'm good. Here we go. Okay. Can everybody see my screen? Yeah, thank you. All right. So we are on the financial aid homepage. I wanted to start here just so I'm really obvious in kind of checking us through this process. So financial aid is your, as a student, financial aid is your key. They are the gatekeeper. They are the funnel. If you come to the foundation, we're going to send you to financial aid. We cannot be involved with awarding because we work with donors, and there's actually IRS rules about why we cannot be involved with awarding. And then two, the way financial aid will look at it is they're going to look at your comprehensive package. And every now and then a student, like for an example, if they are a certain kind of scholarship awardee, they are precluded from getting awards. I mean, that means you probably have a full ride. So in which case you don't need maybe much more. We can share the love. All right, so we're on the financial aid homepage. I'll stick to my steps here before I get off course. Sources of aid. We're at sources of aid. Donor funded scholarships. You're going to come to this page. A couple things before you got to this page. You're going to see this fancy box right here. If you're an undergraduate student, fill out your FAFSA. It is required almost for all of our scholarships that you have a FAFSA on file. It's not so much that we expect to see aid or need exampled on your FAFSA. It's what gives us a very clear financial snapshot. Many of our scholarships are need-based, not all, absolutely not all, but it just allows an authentic view of what else you're receiving and helps everybody have a clear understanding and clear picture when they're going in and awarding and making sure things are balanced. So back to, we clicked on donor funded. So now we're here, donor funded scholarships. I want to say this site, it's a little glitchy. I apologize. I do not have full control over this site. And as we all know, there are some priority items occurring right now in our NMU world that are falling ahead of me getting a fully functioning web page at the moment. So point being, you absolutely can search and try and search for scholarships. Actually, I wanted to do this one as an example and see if what we can get here. So I know we have some, like here's an example of a graduate scholarship. So this is for someone who would be in grad studies, psychology. So that's that one. So what I want to point out though, back on this page, sorry, got off the main one, is this gray box. So our scholarships, donor funded scholarships, most of them, basically like 98% of them, are applied for during a very specific time of year. And that's what I was actually super excited to have this talk be right now. Because basically in the spring, it's sad because it feels very too late. And right now is an awesome time to plan for your winter semester and your next school year. So I think some of you mentioned like you were thinking about coming to grad school for fall 2021. And that's great timing because this would be the time to apply in its January, I always have to kind of move my thing around, January 25 through February 15, 2021. During that time is when current NMU students, admitted NMU students, and that means admitted meaning if you're thinking about grad school for fall 2021, you need to be admitted by this date to apply for these funds and have that FAFSA filed. So there are some boxes to check. So once you have those items in place, you've been admitted, you have your FAFSA filed, you go into the system through your MyNMU. And when you go into MyNMU, just like it says here, very clearly, NMU Foundation Donor Funded Scholarships tab is where you click. And then what happens is we actually have a sorting mechanism. So the scholarships that you're most applicable for should match your profile automatically and float to the top in green. If a scholarship is in red, red means stop, do not apply, you are not eligible, or you're not matching enough that there would be a chance of being awarded. You might see yellow, you could try, but the best ones to go for are green. If you have any questions on that, contact financial aid. So again, red, yellow, green, red means stop, yellow means maybe, green means go, hit apply. So you will hit apply, you do have to hit a button, apply. There is a place to put in a personal statement, which I highly recommend, just to give us, again, more context and understanding. Every now and then we've had ties with scholarship awarding, and so those statements sometimes help push one way or another. And let's see, our scholarships also are available for global campus students. We had 2 different funds this year that were for what we kind of called like emergency funds or COVID relief fund. We did have one COVID relief fund that was started in March, and we awarded all of that funding out the door, basically to students last year that had issues and sent us information to award, with some remaining funds going to the food pantry. This year, the one that is for emergency situations we have is still our flexible aid fund. We've had that one for many years, and that is available, again, both to undergraduate and graduate students. If you come upon more of a emergent issue, something that comes up that was unforeseen, a barrier to continuing your education as you are getting closer to being done, keep that fund in mind, of course, and always. So once you apply in that time frame, and February 15, that will close. I'm gonna actually stop sharing now. Then you.
Yes, by the way, too, we had one question in the chat. I don't know if you, whether international or this would apply for international students.
International can apply. Yes, absolutely. We have actually very specific international student scholarships. And again, I believe Angie Mackey is a good contact, but also, again, financial aid. And you would fall in that same timeline and category, but it never hurts to check in with financial aid and kind of be sure, because every now and then things fall outside those guidelines. And financial aid will do their best with our funds and anything they have available to help you. And do graduate students need to fill out the FAFSA every year or just the incoming year? Every year. Sorry. Every year. Not as painful. Yes, Heather.
Sorry, I just want to let folks know that Angie Mackey isn't doing international program stuff anymore. So maybe you and I, or me and financial aid, need to get together and find out. So our office will be aware of those scholarships too. But right now, I would say financial aid.
Yep. And so I know Lila is our study abroad contact. Do you think she's picking up international also? Or we're not sure yet?
Her or Diana Vreeland.
Sounds like
not entirely sure. So yeah, that's why I didn't break in, because I was like, I don't know who to direct them to instead.
Yeah, sorry. Thank you for bringing that up. So yeah, the main thing is I know they exist. So please look into it. And again, I will say financial aid is the way to go on this. So good questions. Thank you, everybody. Yes. So once you fill FAFSA once, though, just for everybody's purpose, like, again, it's pretty painless the next year once you have all this data entered in from the first time or from one time over. So let's see. Oh, so yes. So international students are eligible. Global campus students are eligible. Then I guess what I was trying to figure out was just our awarding timeline. So February 15th hits. We then have our contacts in financial aid that will go as quickly as they can to get things pieced out and sent out, and students will be notified. Usually the latest I've seen scholarships still be awarded would be like June into June. So you can imagine, so February closes out, and then March people will start to hear, April they'll definitely start to hear, May, they'll definitely start here. Every now and then we creep into June. They're usually all out the door between March, April, May, because we like for students to know as they wrap up a school year or they're planning their summer, what they have available. We definitely are trying to let you know what you have available so you can plan as well. And again, all the amounts and the criteria varies because, as you can imagine, over the years, donors have been either very particular or not particular and have created their intentions and their legacies and their wishes to be a variety of things: need-based, GPA-based, particular to majors, particular to graduate versus undergraduate. A lot of times we have a lot of scholarships that are for students from the UP. So that could give you a summation. I feel like someone unmuted. Does someone have a question? Trying to see. So in a nutshell, that is donor-funded scholarships. We are excited that we have a wonderful group of alumni and donors to work with at NMU, and we are gearing up to, do as best we can to fundraise and create more opportunities for students, more scholarships. More scholarships are, our goal is to increase the amount of scholarships at levels that really move the needle for people, so that fully cover tuition or at least half of their tuition, so that really students can have a burden lifted. Right now, again, you're going to see scholarships anywhere from $500 to maybe $4,000 to $5,000 are where most of them land. So they're worth applying for, my opinion. And again, if you have any questions, financial aid, Laura Clifton Rice, specifically in financial aid, is a really, really great contact and great person to reach out to. And I'm here too, happy to answer questions that I can and always route people where needed, except to Angie Mackey. Sorry, gave that wrong. What else? Any other questions? Seems confusing, but I promise it's not. Just remember that timeline, mark your calendar, put it in your phone, note, reminder, alarm, apply, pretty painless. Good? All right, that's my piece. I'll stay on for a little bit and then I have another one I have to jump to. So thank you so much, Janelle, for including me and the foundation.
Thank you so much for coming. That was really helpful.
Oh, and just a little plug for NMU Day of Giving, December 1. Participation is key. Every little bit helps. And our food pantry push this year is cash over cans because COVID. And also they have the ability to purchase more with $1 than we can with $1 because they have buying programs for food with discounts. So just have to give that plug. Again, every little bit, $1, $5, anything is really helpful and we appreciate it. And it all goes back to our amazing students and campus.
And there's links to those on the foundation website, both of those?
www.nmu.edu/Day of Giving.
All right.
Cool, thank you.
And I am next. I'm Kristen Beck. I am Assistant Director of Grant Development and Training Coordinator for the Grants and Contracts Office at Northern. And the Grants and Contracts Office is held within the Graduate Education and Research Office. So kind of one arm of that office. I'm going to share some slides and I'm going to go rather quickly. For the slides today, I didn't talk much about the process of grant writing. I just want to get some resources and some opportunities which may be of interest to students. And then hopefully having more detailed workshops, probably not until spring because the end of the semester is rapidly approaching. And I know everybody feels a little zoomed out. So I'm going to share a screen here and just give me a minute to get it set up. And so I can find my mouse again. So is it everybody see the slides or is it the split screen?
Well, on mine, it's seeing the slides, but seeing like your view of the slides.
Okay, let me change that. Single slide now? Yeah. Okay. So we're going to talk a little bit today about external funding through grants, fellowships, and other sources. So we're going to go a little bit quickly because we're running a little tight on time, and I have some other meetings this afternoon also. So what we're going to talk about today, briefly, external funding, what you need to know, and some of the policies and procedures here at Northern, which are very similar to any other university that you will may attend. So it's not new and different. It's similar policies wherever you go. You'll find out, I'll give you a little information about where to look. So there might be some back and forth on slides, and I'll kind of save that for the end just because it takes a couple seconds to drop the PowerPoint slides and pull up a web browser. And I'll talk a little bit about some specific opportunities, the NSF Graduate Research Fellowship, and then some Fulbright student opportunities. And then also I added a few other newer opportunities that I was just able to find in the last couple days. So when you're applying for funding for your project, contact the Grants and Contracts Office as soon as possible. So it'd be myself, Kristen Beck, or the director, Erica Goff, in the office. We're kind of 2 people right now. Our office will be growing a little bit more, but contact us as soon as possible. We want to assist with developing the proposal, budget, and working with the sponsor. So when you submit your proposal, you're not actually the one submitting it. We go through whatever software we have to use or whatever portal for grant submission. And some of them are very archaic and not very user-friendly, but we are the ones to submit. For any of your grant applications, there must be a faculty member involved with your project. So this would be your advisor or faculty member if you're doing a project specific to a class. And the reason for this, you would still be considered co-principal investigator on the project, but Northern can be audited for 7 years after a grant application. And what we don't want to find out is where you are around the world and try and track you down and say, oh, do you remember how you actually spent this $500? You know, what kind of supplies did you buy? Do you have the receipts still? So we put this burden on faculty members. They don't move around as much. And then that way, if there are any questions, it is the faculty member to provide the information to the sponsor or to the auditors. So it's just a must. That's similar for any university. We do not want to put that burden on a student. We will route internal processing. So we have a software system called Cayuse. And this is just to make sure that your faculty member, your department, and any other involved in the project know that this proposal is being submitted, and that if it is funded, there are some requirements during the proposal and reporting requirements which must be done. So we always do that prior to submission. So that's why it's important that you contact our office as soon as you might be interested in applying for a grant, and that we can get everything routed ahead of time. Once again, we will submit the proposal to the sponsor. So some areas where to look for funding. The first one's pretty easy, search Google. They know a lot. And this is if you have an idea, say, I'm gonna use an example of a grad student. He was translating a book of poetry into English that has never been translated prior to this. And he found a foundation, a very small foundation related to poetry down in Florida. And I haven't heard of it before. He contacted the foundation and they said, yeah, this is something we might be able to fund. So he was able to get enough funding to stay at Northern for the summer to finish translating this book of poetry to English. It was a great opportunity for him. I didn't know about this foundation. But he said he found it on Google and he took the initiative to contact the sponsor. And at that point, he got me involved right away. So that way there was always clear communication between the student, the sponsor, and our office. So we knew when the funding would be coming in, when his report would be due, and any requirements during the summer to report on how he spent the funds, and we all work together. Some other places to look for funding: fellow students, faculty members, either at NMU or other institutions. So you might be really interested in nursing, and you might have colleagues or faculty members or family members that work at different institutions or who have gone to school there. Asking them where they got their funding from is sometimes a key in figuring out where you might be able to get your funding from. We have access to a database called InfoEdSpin. So if you're in Google and you're on Northern's campus, right in the search bar, you can type InfoEdSpin. And I'll show you this at the end of my presentation, just so I'm not going back and forth. It's a grant database that's updated daily for grant opportunities all over the world. So just be aware, it can be difficult and you need to really narrow down the keywords when you use it. If you type in biology, you might get 4,000 options. So you might want to narrow it down to a specific animal or research area. So while you're doing this, keeping in mind that searching for funding, it might take you 3 days to find 5 opportunities to apply for. It is still time consuming, and it is kind of trying to find what options are available and what works best for your projects. Many times, if you're a member of professional organizations, they also have funding available or scholarships available to members of those organizations. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about external funding opportunities, some very specific ones that you might be interested in. The first one is the National Science Foundation Graduate Research Fellowship Program. This Graduate Research Fellowship Program funds 3 out of 5 years of master's or doctoral degrees for students. It's very highly competitive. On average, they usually fund only about 8 to 13% of proposals that are submitted. It's due in October every year, and I usually host a workshop in the spring. However, this past year, it was in the fall. So it was kind of tight turnaround. Students were coming back in August and September, and then hosting a workshop, and applications are due in October. 2 years ago, we did have an awardee for this. She finished up her master's degree at Northern and then transferred to the University of Washington to complete her PhD in biology. If you are awarded this fellowship, it provides you a stipend of $34,000 and also generally covers your tuition. So your tuition is covered and you receive $34,000 a year for your stipend for your research. There's a link to the website, and if you just search NSF Graduate Research Fellowship Program or GRFP, that would bring you to the website. There's a couple fellowship opportunities that I also want to bring up. There are 2 Fulbright programs, the Fulbright UK Summer Institute, in which you could be an undergraduate student, or the Fulbright Student Program, where you would have to be a graduate student. And also the NSF Research Experience for Undergrads, and then another additional fellowship program, the Mickey Leland Energy Fellowship Program. So I'll just talk briefly about these. The Fulbright UK Summer Program is a 3 or 4 week program geared for US undergraduate students. So I just want to make sure that if someone is thinking about graduate school and they're not enrolled yet, that this would be a shorter Fulbright opportunity, which would also look good while you are thinking about applying to graduate school. For this 3 to 4 week program, the award covers airfare, tuition and fees at the host institution. So you would usually be taking a course or have a series of courses during that time you're there, accommodations, and in some cases, depending on where you go, you may get an allowance for meals. The timeline, applications open in November and they close sometime in February. You would be notified in May with possible interviews later in May, and then in June, you would find out if you're accepted into this program. Please be aware right now, due to COVID, they are planning on fulfilling the UK summer program, but they are unsure at this time. The Fulbright US student program is what graduate students and what many people think as the real long Fulbright program. These programs have two options. You could do a study and research project or apply to be an English teaching assistant. You would be at the host institution for 1 academic year. So this would be a definite longer portion of your graduate career. During this, you meet, work, live with, and learn from people in the host country. So this program really wants students to consider where they would be living for the academic year. And they really want this to be a back and forth of learning about your host country and also teaching others in the host country about the US. So they want this to be a very fluid and exchange of knowledge and information between the two countries. The Open Study or Research Awards are, you design a specific proposal for a specific country. So you might want to be at a specific research lab or at a specific museum or a specific campus to be able to carry out your research or study. The English Teaching Assistant Awards are a little bit different. You're supplementing the local English language instruction and to provide a native speaker of English to that area. For the English Teaching Assistant Awards, you can also specify if you want to be in an elementary school, a high school, or a secondary institution. These applications are also due in October. So I'll be holding a workshop in March or April. So that way you can think about these opportunities over the summer to try and help develop a very concise proposal. I'll just touch briefly on this. The NSF research experience for undergrads is host institutions, usually within the US, have opportunities where you would be able to go there for a period of time, generally during the summer, to work with faculty and other researchers. And there's a list of searching for a REU site available on their website. Once again, a lot of the REU programs were halted this summer because they're usually held at research institutions or in labs or remote locations. And because of COVID, it was, many of them were canceled for the summer of 2020. The Mickey Leland Fellowship Program has a deadline of January. It's a 10-week summer program at a US Department of Energy site. So this one is geared towards providing students to work on hands-on research with the US Department of Energy. They're really trying to push and have the goal of opportunities for underrepresented and minority students in STEM fields. So this is a pretty interesting one. I have not had any students apply for this one yet, but relatively new and a deadline that hasn't passed in October, which also made me fairly excited. You'll train under the mentorships of scientists and engineers. And also, like most fellowships, you would receive a weekly stipend and may be eligible for housing and travel allowances. It kind of depends on which lab you would be at and what their process is. If you have any questions, you can also email me. I'm working remotely. So if you call, it goes through my email, or you can email krbeck@nmu.edu. And I'll show you InfoEd Spin briefly, just to show you how that works. give me a moment here. So I think everybody can see. Info ed spin. I usually don't type it all in caps. I don't know why I did today. So if you are on NMU's campus, you have access to Info ed spin right away. If you are not on NMU's campus, you'll need to click in the right-hand side, sign in, and sign in through your NMU email address. This is because we pay for a subscription to the service, and it has to be through NMU's internet or through signing in with your NMU email. I will just to kind of show you what comes up, I'll type in biology. And it found 950 opportunities in biology. I'll click on one of these opportunities just to kind of show you what it looks like. So the academic summer undergraduate research experience through Dartmouth College. It has a deadline of February 1st, 2021. Are you able to see that pop-up window? Probably not. So I will share the, so a new window will pop up on anything that you click on. So it talks a little bit about the deadline date, eligibility. So it's open to all outside non-Dartmouth students. To participate, you must be currently enrolled full-time, be in good academic standing of a GPA of 3.0, demonstrate a committed interest to pursue a graduate study towards a PhD or MD PhD, have completed at least 2 semesters and have at least 1 semester remaining of your undergraduate education by the start of the summer program, and be a documented US citizen or non-citizen national or permanent residents. So it gives you a link for more information. It talks a little bit more about the program, what it would entail. Once again, your eligibility. Funding would provide a stipend, housing, and food allowance once you're accepted into the program. Deadline, February 1st, 2021. And it just gives a little bit additional information. So if you want to contact the sponsor. So going through this can be a little time consuming, but it is a great way to find out what funding might be out there for anyone. And just understanding that it does take time to go through the system and find out what opportunities may be available. Does anyone have any questions at all?
I didn't say, what's the best way to reach the grants and contracts office if somebody starts to work on a external grant?
You could either email, we have a broad email, also grants@nmu.edu. So that would get funneled more towards the correct person. I handle primarily education-based grants, but it varies depending on how busy our office is. So I would say first, just go through grants@nmu.edu. Thank you, Janelle.
I'm gonna stop the